picking up in Ruth chapter 3. And this is really under the heading of Ruth's redemption, looking at Ruth's, the mother-in-law's plan for Ruth. Now, some commentators think that, I guess they think that maybe Naomi was a little, what's the word they use? Basically, maybe a little nosy maybe, or maybe pushing a little bit when she begins to encourage Ruth to do what she's about to do. Though it doesn't really seem that way when you read all the context of what's happening. It doesn't really seem that Naomi was doing anything that really was beyond what she should have been doing as a mother-in-law to encourage Ruth to find a husband. But anyway, you'll see what I mean as we go through this. Ruth chapter 3, beginning in verse 1, looking at verses 1 through 6, says, Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, My daughter, shall I seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now, you got to put yourself in Ruth's place. Your husband has died, and your mother-in-law is trying to basically find you a husband. In Bible times, that wasn't unusual. They even had arranged marriages and things such as that. But that's what she looks like in verse 1. That's what she's wanting to do. She says, Shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you are with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley. He's winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself, anoint yourself, put on your best garment, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Verse 4 says, Then it shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do. Now, this doesn't seem like she's asking Naomi or Ruth to go in basically to have relations with this guy. She's going to uncover his feet. I think that probably means something, or I don't know what it means exactly during Bible times, what that uncovering the feet mean. I tried to find it, couldn't really find anything on it. Found people that said, well, Naomi isn't trying to encourage her to lay down and have relations with Boaz. That's really all I found on it. But whatever the occasion, to uncover his feet, I don't know how you are, but when I'm at home, if my feet become uncovered, that is my blanket gets tossed around, I'll notice it. And so I'm going to find a blanket and pull it up on me. That may sound a little weird, but maybe that's enough for him to alert, to wake up and realize, hey, there's somebody at my feet. And so I don't know if that's really the case. That's just kind of what it sounds like it could be for me, or for her rather. But it doesn't seem like she did anything. I don't think there's not anything here that says that she actually did anything simple like sleeping with Boaz. And so verses 1 through 5, she tells Ruth what she should do, and tells her basically that Boaz is out winnowing the barley. Get cleaned up, put on your best garment, and when he wait for him to eat, wait for him to go to sleep, and then uncover his feet and lay down at his feet. It seems like to me it's a gesture of her maybe saying that she wants to be under his care, or maybe even become his wife. It doesn't seem like anything more beyond that. Because why would you wait till you fell asleep if all you're going to do is lay down at his feet? It doesn't seem like there's anything else beyond that. So it must have been some type of gesture to signify that she maybe wanted to be under his care, maybe to show that she was interested in him, I don't know. But it's not anything sinful seems to have taken place, or to be encouraged here in verses 1 through 5, or 1 through 4. Now verse 5 says, And she said to her, All that you say to me I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her to do. Now, if you're not familiar with the law concerning brothers, and I mentioned it earlier, those, you have two brothers, one brother's his wife dies without children, the other brother is to marry the widowed daughter or sister-in-law, go into her so she can have children. Now Deuteronomy 25 verses 5 through 10, what's on the screen now, it's going to say exactly that. It says, If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. That's what seems we're talking about here in the book of Ruth. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. So it's like carrying on his name. Now, verse 7 says, now this is where it gets interesting, I think. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate of the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, verse 9 and 10, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. Now that's pretty interesting to me. So I don't want to marry you. So she comes in before the elders after you've already talked to them, and she takes the sandal off your foot and spits in your face. That probably might be enough to convince some guys, well, that's pretty embarrassing. Okay, I will marry her. Verse 10 says, and his name shall be called in Israel the house of him who had his sandal removed. And so it's really a disgrace, basically, to not take care of your brother's wife if she didn't have if she did not have a son by him. And so that's what we're dealing with in chapter 3 and chapter 4. And I say that because we start talking about redeeming Ruth. You need to know this is what he's talking about. That is, the nearest relative is to redeem her or to take her. And then if not, then as we'll see also, as you know the story of Ruth that Boaz does. And so that's important when we think about what it means to redeem someone. Now we have Boaz's response in verses 7 through 18 of Ruth chapter 3. It says, and after Boaz had eaten and drunk, his heart was cheerful, and he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. She came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. You notice that's all it says that she did, nothing else. She uncovered his feet and laid down. Now it happened at midnight that a man was startled and turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet. So she wasn't even lying next to him, she's lying at his feet. Obviously, there's nothing going on there, but she is lying at his feet so he can notice that she's there. She's not trying to be sneaky or be manipulative. She is at his feet. Verse 9, and he said, who are you? So she answered, I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative. And so that is what she is doing. She's saying, basically, take me as your wife. I'm your close relative. As we saw in Deuteronomy, she has the law. She has no son. Then the close relative is to take her for his wife. Verse 10 says, then he said, blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. It's compliment after compliment. It seems like they're kind of, if you didn't know the story, but you think they're sucking up to one another, because Boaz compliments her, then she compliments him, all that kind of stuff. Here he says you didn't go after a young man, whether rich or poor, poor or rich. And he says in verse 11, he says, I will do for you I will do for you all that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. That's what I get for having that last donut. So all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. So it's interesting that she is pretty well known. And known for being a virtuous woman, a good woman. If you want to be known for something, you don't want to be known for being a heathen or a harlot. You want to be known for being, as we see in verse 11, a virtuous woman. The Bible says, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. And so there will be no shame or nothing negative said about him taking Ruth as his wife. She is a virtuous woman. Now it is true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Now, before we go any further, think about that term, virtuous woman. And you hear people say, well, that's a good, you want to find a good woman or a good man, whatever the case may be. You can switch around. You have virtuous women, and you also have godly, righteous men. Well, you hear people say today they want to find a good woman or find a good man, and many times it's quite different from what the Bible says is a good woman or is a good man. But she is here recognized as a good woman because she is a virtuous woman. She was a woman who took care of her mother-in-law, who she didn't have to. She showed kindness basically to everybody, especially to her mother-in-law, but also to Boaz. She asked permission before she gleaned the field, so she's respectful. She's honest. She's hardworking. The Bible says she worked, the servant, the head of the servants said that she came, she asked, and then she has gleaned all day, all but for a short break in the house, so she knows what it means to work. And she has a reputation now, because of all this, as being a virtuous woman. And now Boaz says in verse 12, again, this shows you his honesty and his integrity. He says, now it is true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. It means there's someone else. You have to make sure that they are going to decide they want to take you as their wife or not. And so Boaz is honest and forthright throughout all of this. Verse 13 says, so stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you as the Lord lives. Lie down until the morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize another. Then he said, do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. It seems like he's talking, I believe, to his servants. So he tells her to stay the night. Why is that? Well, you don't want somebody to see Ruth leaving in the middle of the night, do you? And so she leaves early in the morning while everybody else is still either asleep or it's too early. The daylight hasn't quite rose. It's early in the morning. And she leaves before someone can recognize her or see one another easily, and so she leaves now. In verse 14 says, then he said, do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Basically he told his servants, if you see her, keep quiet about it. Don't say anything. Now, if they know Boaz, which if you work for a man, you know his integrity, and they know Ruth because she's been there for a good period of time, it seems already. And so it's probably a good chance that even the servants knew that nothing was out of place. Now, verse 15 says, also he said, bring the shawl that is on you. Now, again, this is him telling Ruth what to do before. It seems like before the next day before she leaves. He said, bring the shawl that is on you and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. Why would you do that? So it seemed like she's been working. It would basically cover up her tracks, so to speak. Now, they haven't done anything dishonest, but sometimes you do things because you don't want anybody to think anything wrong. You don't want anybody to think anything that really, don't want them to think evil of you when nothing has gone on. And so there's a good possibility this has to do with it making it seem like that she has been working, and here's her 6 ephahs of barley. Now, if you remember before, even when she gathered up behind the gleaners and they dropped stuff, how much barley did she have? Just 1. And so now he sends her back with 6. So obviously he is in a very good mood about what Ruth is wanting to do. Verse 16, when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, is that you, my daughter? Then she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, these 6 ephahs of barley he gave me, for he said to me, do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. Now that is a very generous man, because there's even a possibility that he can even take her as his wife, because he's got to go and check in on that nearest relative. And so you see the integrity of Boaz just shining through over and over again. Verse 18, then she said, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out, for the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day. And so she basically tells Ruth to stay put until all this has worked out. You think about that, that's pretty good idea, because if she went out into the field, what do you think the good chance the gleaners were been talking about? They could have been talking about Ruth and Boaz. About, hey, she may be his wife. But she stays there, and the Bible says there that Naomi told her, stay, he will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day. Now in chapter 4 we begin what's really called, what I call Boaz redeems Ruth, and Ruth bears, we'll see later, bears a son. This first section is called Ruth's nearest relative, because Boaz has to go and make sure that this nearest relative does not want to take her as his wife. It is a lawful thing to do, and also the honest thing to do. So now in Ruth chapter 4 and verse 1, it says, now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. Behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, come aside, friend, sit down here. So he came came aside and sat down, and he took 10 men and the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sit down. You notice what he's doing? He's making an audience, basically. But the elders of the city also had to be there, as we know, because you remember Deuteronomy 25, who was there when the men were talking about how to deal with this woman who has lost her husband? The elders of the city were there. And so Boaz does stuff just like the law has stated. He calls aside the nearest relative, he gathers the elders, and here he goes. He is taking care of business, it seems like, right away. Verse 3 says, then he said to the close relative, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. Verse 4 says, and I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, but if you will not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know, for there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance. So he asked him first if he'd buy the land, and he says yes. And he says, okay, you also got to take care of Ruth. And that's kind of where it's, wait a second. And so it's kind of interesting how Boaz does that. He kind of gives a two-step thing. He sees he's interested, and then he also, and when he does, he says, well, okay, you got to take care of Ruth. Because to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance meant you got to take her as your wife and perform the duty of the husband. And so now in verse 6 says, and the close relative said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem it. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. And so the close relative is unable to do it. He says here, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. And so he's not going to be able to do it. And so now Boaz will redeem Ruth. Verses 7 through 12 says, now this was a custom in former times in Israel, concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm anything, one man took off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was a confirmation in Israel. You know, today we probably just settle with a handshake or signing a piece of paper. Well, here's my smelly shoe. Now we're confirming this deal. Since they walked everywhere, that probably wasn't something they were. Okay, we're confirming. Here's my sandal. They probably went, okay, thanks, and I don't know. But that's how they did. They confirmed it with taking off their sandal and handing it to the other person. Cultures are pretty interesting sometimes. And so he gave it to the other, and this was a confirmation in Israel. Verse 8, therefore the close relative said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. So he took off his sandal, and Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilon's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. He just inherited also probably a lot of land, not just Ruth here in just a second. But he takes everything basically. Moreover, Ruth and the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. You are witnesses this day. And so that's it. He has now been given the ability to take Ruth as his wife. Verses 7 through 12, he has redeemed her. Let's finish up verse 11 and 12. I thought it was end of it. And all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and like Leah, the two who built the house of Israel, and may you prosper in Ephrath and be famous in Bethlehem. Do you remember what stands out about Rachel and Leah? Their beauty. Remember, the Bible says one was beautiful, behold. One had kind eyes or something. Another one was beautiful in form and appearance, something like that, along those lines. Basically, they were beautiful women. And so, when he says here that the Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, let her be beautiful. The two who built the house of Israel, and may you prosper in Ephrath and be famous in Bethlehem. Well, Ruth already is pretty well known throughout all the town because she was known as the virtuous woman, or as a virtuous woman, rather. Verse 12, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this young woman. And so they basically want him to take her and to be prosperous with her and be able to do the duty of a husband to bear children with her. Now, in verses 13 through 22, you have what I call the descendants of Ruth and Boaz. It says here in verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and when he went into her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And so what? Now the line continues. Verse 14, the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name be famous in Israel. And may he be to you a restorer of life, a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Whenever people talk about Ruth, they talk about her in a complimentary fashion, each and every time. It's not about some floozy or some harlot. They talk about how good she is to Naomi. It says there in verse 15, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Well, she certainly was good to her. Verse 16 says, then Naomi took the child and laid him on her bosom and became a nurse to him. Also the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now this is the genealogy of Perez. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Abinadab. Abinadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse. And Jesse begot David, who came of the lineage of David, Christ. And so we see that also through other genealogy accounts that even Ruth also is mentioned in the lineage there of Christ as well. And so you think about all that we have seen from Ruth. She was a woman who could be followed after her example. Her kindness, her work ethic, her love for her family, like we saw with Naomi, her generosity. She worked, and she also, of course, she shared with Naomi. She did what was virtuous among the people. You might say, her report among the people was that she was a virtuous woman. And of course, if you're a virtuous woman, obviously you're not a harlot or anything else. You're a good woman, even one who you might say is well controlled and well behaved. We can't say that about every woman. We can't say that about every guy either. But we know that Ruth was a good example of what it means to be a woman who lives as she should and behaves as she should and treats others as she should, her kindness and things such as that. Now I have just 3 points here. I think we're to stop in 5 minutes. Well, not even 5 minutes. So quickly, I have 3 lessons for you. First one, Ruth and Naomi were great examples of what the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law should be. How many people do you know who have mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws and they just don't get along? You know, they bicker, they argue different things for various reasons. But Ruth and Naomi wasn't that way. The second one, we can learn from Boaz how important it is to provide aid for members of your family. Now, he was a close relative. We don't know how close exactly, but how well did he take care of Ruth and Naomi as an extension? Well, very, very well. When he sent her back the last time to Naomi, he sent her back with 6 ephahs of barley. And so he was very, very generous. And it seems like he probably was also pretty wealthy if he's able to do that as well. The third one, Boaz and Ruth both did what was right in the eyes of God. Now, the Bible doesn't actually say that Ruth was a follower of God, but she does make several statements that seem like she became a follower of God, at least throughout the book of Ruth, because the way she talks about Boaz, she talks about how basically how the Lord bless you and those types of things. And so if she wasn't a follower of God, it seemed like she became one throughout the course of the book. We know that in chapter 1, you remember that Naomi told Ruth to go back with her other daughter-in-law and to the land she came from and to worship her gods, which means she wasn't always a follower of God unless she became one during the course of our book here. Okay, we're going to stop there because